expectations regarding what are the major factors, and then you can go out and measure those in the survey, certainly, which would again be another. Yeah.
Can I make a brief observation about the series of quantitative research in the context of India? Because that also leads to confusion between qualitative research and quantitative research. So most often what happens, like one of the most prominent institutions that has been doing Indian election studies, that is official election studies, that collect a lot of empirical data, but that can't be quantitative studies because if you look at most of the CSDS publication, it doesn't move beyond crosstab and doesn't move beyond frequency. So for example, in your case, it might be just the use of empirical data, but it might not be in case of the triangulation, because that's where if you are building qualitative and quantitative research, that's where I think you have to, for example, American tradition, so they will not say like crosstab with the quantitative research. You have the empirical data, but can we really call it a quantitative study? So that is one of the questions, and I think, and that is a problem with Indian social sciences. Often we say that we are doing quantitative research, but that might not be the quantitative research in the sense that we are not really predicting anything. We are just we are not doing any developing any model based on statistical data. So maybe I don't know. I
mean, to some degree, I'd like to say you're right, and on the other hand, if you look at the very formal definition of what quantitative data is, that's the moment when you stick numbers to some social reality. And those numbers could appear in a crosstab or in a frequency distribution or in a function network model. No. Exactly. What does happen usually when you have gathered quantitative data, you might want to use inferential statistics, for instance, to draw conclusions about a bigger population than just the data that you looked at. And I think that's maybe rather the difference, that sometimes you would see qualitative empirical studies giving you a crosstab, but that wouldn't claim that shows that that's valid for a bigger population, whereas then you would to that crosstab add a chi-square test or whatever and would claim that what I find here is true for a bigger population. But it's an interesting observation.
The nature of the data, that's more definitive than what to do with the data.
We're a bit short in time, so I'll try to rush through this because it's, and then we'll take a break. Another 5 minutes. And so this quantitative research process, which is basically, this side of the wheel, right? That's the one we'll be looking at in the next few days, and we'll be focusing on the next few days. So what happens is you've got a theory, you've got ideas about reality, you draw from that hypothesis, you do your empirical test, that means you collect data and so on and so forth. That leads you to support or falsify that hypothesis, and that actually does feed back into theory development. So what's happening here is it's not just testing theory, but, and that's important, it does refine theory. Sorry?
Can we call that manipulating, like something on the theory?
Yeah, maybe you could actually, so that's, I mean, I never came up with a grand theory, and I'm not sure I ever will. But I take theories and I try to show what the limits are of theories, what nuances need to be added to theories to make them fitting better to social reality, to make them even more valuable in terms of explaining what's out there. And that's what quantification or the quantitative process can do. And that's maybe all they can do. But that's also fine. And that's important. You know, sorry to say, but I'm afraid that maybe only 1 or 2 of us will have the abilities to come up with the grand theory that's going to travel for the next 200 years. But I'm afraid to say again, not going to be many Nobel Prize winners in this room. That's just statistics, you know. It's not saying anything about you. So doing the grand theory stuff is maybe not for most of us, but doing the revising, adding, nuancing of existing theories, that's what we all can do and can accomplish. So again, you've got an idea, interest, what causes why. We look at theories, and that's the process which you hopefully will go through in half an hour from now. We look at theories. Oh yeah, there's a theory that X could actually cause Y. Oh, that's a good idea. And then I translate that into a theoretical expectation. So Y is a function of X. And operationalize those variables, come to test the hypothesis. Again, Y is a function of X, small in this case. And then I'm adding my observations, and I actually can test to what degree, whether and to what degree Y is actually a function of X. Here, the hypothesis was that uneducated people are more prejudiced than educated people, right? That's a hypothesis which you would maybe even find in the literature. If these are your data, if this is your crosstab, by the way, and it is a simple crosstab, if this is your data, you would support that hypothesis. You see more unprejudiced people in the educated group and more prejudiced people in the uneducated group. Clear linear relationship here supporting the hypothesis. If these are your observations, you don't support the hypothesis. That's as easy as it gets, right? You collect your empirical observations, you collect your data, and then you can draw conclusions based on those data. And in this case, again, this would be a simple crosstab with a Kaiser-Ware test maybe. So not hard to do, no rocket science. Now the initial critique of this would be, yeah, but it's not only about education. There's so many other things that make people prejudiced. And we'll come to that during that. So in this cycle of, in this quantitative research process, theory, hypothesis, and so on and so forth, this is basically, maybe a bit of this at some point. These are the things that we'll try to cover in this course. So we talk a lot about research design, operationalization, sampling, data collection instruments, and adding to that, I'll here and there try to talk a bit about analysis techniques, not in the sense of going lengthy through formulas, but in the sense of what would I see as more standard techniques to tackle data coming from these different types of research. So we won't be talking much about theory and hypothesis. We won't be talking much about conclusions and reporting results. That's a different ballgame. I should add here that things that we talk about in the next 5 days are things that I've also talked about in 3 different seminars over an entire semester. So, experimentation, I'm just now doing a seminar on experimentation, which is 10 days, not full days, but at least a couple of sessions. Yeah, I think you're getting a lot in short time, but it also means that we can't go into depth with every aspect of what we're talking about. So much of this is also giving you a glimpse and talking from some of my experience and giving you examples, but I can't promise that we tackle everything to the finest detail. But this is the stuff that we should try. We'll take a 10 minute break or so. Yeah? Maybe 10 minutes. Let's continue and try to do better during the next days. I'll try. So we know we're in the quantitative research process. Let's talk a bit about what these data are that we'll be talking about during the next days. And there is something which is called data theory, which as soon as you really dive into it becomes very mathematical. And I don't want to get into the mathematical stuff here. I just want to talk a bit about the basics of data theory. There we go. This is very small. Sorry for that. I'll work on. I won't show what the room looks like, so I'll work on the layout tomorrow. But I'll read it out a bit. In a general sense, it says data are quantities that are generated from empirical observations. That means data are observations. There's an empirical reality out there, and we'll get to examples in a second, but I want to stay abstract. There's an empirical reality out there, which could be anything we study, right? And we're trying to turn that reality into numbers. And that's the data that we're working with. And these data are then used to test theories and make inferences or predictions. Because we can't, for a qualitative researcher, and then I stop talking about the divide, a word would be data, or a picture would be data. I can't do inferential statistics with words or pictures. In order for me to do inferential statistics, to come to inferences, predictions, explanations, I need numbers. I can't work with anything but numbers. So that's what we're talking about in data theory, how to translate what's out there into numbers. And we attach meaning to those observations, to those numbers. The problem is that we as researchers pick what aspect of a reality to turn into numbers in which way. It is possible for any empirical observation to generate different kinds of data. Therefore, it is up to the researcher to select what kind of data is used for the investigation. And I'm only quickly referring back to the income example that we talked about a couple of minutes ago. And this choice significantly influenced the analysis of and the conclusions drawn from data. Again, if I measure income this way or that way, my conclusions would be very different based on different types of measures. Yeah? There's an empirical reality out there that we all earn money, or all have money at our disposal, at least. But the way I measure what we have could differ, and therefore the conclusions I draw based on those measurements could differ. And that's important in assumptions from data theory. Data theory tries to outline general assumptions about the nature of data, such as the relationship between data analysis and interpretation. Data theory describes how real-world empirical observations are translated into analyzable quantities. Again, data, numbers, data, that's what we want. And again, a single observation provides the researcher with a lot of information, and only a subset of that information is used. So any one of us looking at humans, I can't capture a human in data, a human being and his mind in data. I can't quantify you or you or you. I can only quantify certain aspects of who you are. And that's the aspects that I need, that I'm interested in for my research project. And some things are easier to quantify than others. We'll come to that. And so you as a human are a single observation. The news text could be a single observation or a movie. And it's very hard to quantify everything that's in there. But we need to make decisions about what we want to quantify. So choosing which aspects of information are used and which are discarded is a very important step in the research project process. Yeah? Should be very obvious, but again, today is about reflecting what we're doing and reflecting how we position what we do today. So these observations are comprised of information obtained from the observable reality, while the data that we generate are comprised of the information that the researchers choose to use for their quantitative studies. And data theory helps us to do that a little bit. There's two major ways to think about data and data theory. I know it's getting small. I'm very sorry about that. I'll fix that. One approach is this representational theory of data, which is trying to make this conversion process from reality into data a bit more clear and transparent, maybe. So the relational theory's main focus is to describe real empirical systems. Objects which have one or more common attributes are placed in classes according to the value of the attribute, and I'll show you an example in a second. And the objects out there, and the relationships between the objects out there, that make the empirical relation system, the ERS. So the reality out there, the object that we're interested in, again, could be persons, newspaper articles, birds, whatever. They are the empirical reality. They are something, they have attributes, and they have relationships between each other. Yeah? And now we have to make sure that we quantify, translate this reality into numbers. So this empirical relational system is turned into a numerical relational system, which is constructed of numbers and the relationship between numbers. And the idea then is to equate the empirical relational system and the numerical relational system in a way that the relationship between numbers is matched by the relationship between objects. You know? It's translating what's out there into a different language, and that language is numbers. It's figures. And those I can then use to do statistical operations, ranging from simple frequency distributions to complex multi-mode networks or whatever you want. I'll come back to that in 2 minutes. There's the operational theory of data, which covers a different aspect of what data, how we can understand data actually, which focuses much more on measurement. Focuses on how the concept was measured. There are no assumptions being made about the underlying empirical reality of this. Again, examples in a second. And what this is useful for to reflect later on is that if an attribute that we measure through numbers is useful or should be useful in our analysis, it should be very precise. We should always have very precise measures of what we're interested in. And the more precise, the better. That's a problem for the social sciences because many of the things we're interested in are very complex. And that's very hard to measure precisely. And that's something, again, we have to take into account when we come up with measurement devices.